against the stars. The war rockets were very near now. They still emitted monstrous jettings of thick white vapor. They climbed up with incredible speed. One went by Joe at a distance of little more than a mile, and its fumes eddied out to half that before they thinned to nothingness. They went on and on and on. They burned out somewhere. It would be a long time before they fell back to Earth, hours probably. Then they would be meteors. They'd vaporize before they touched solidity. They wouldn't even explode. But Joe and the Chief rode back to the platform. It was surprising how hard it was to match speed with it again, to make a good entrance into the giant lock. They barely made it before the platform made its plunge into that horrible blackness which was the Earth's shadow. And Joe was very glad they did make it before then. He wouldn't have liked to be merely astride a skinny framework in that ghastly darkness, with the monstrous blackness of the abyss seeming to be trying to devour him. Haney met them in the airlock. He grinned. "Nice job, Joe. Nice job, Chief," he said warmly. The lieutenant commander wants you to report to him, Joe, right away." Joe cocked an eyebrow at him. "What for?" Haney spread out his hands. The Chief grunted. "That guy bothers me. I'll bet, Joe, he's going to explain you shouldn't have gone out when he didn't want you to. Me, I'm keeping away from him." The Chief shed his spacesuit and swaggered away, as well as anyone could swagger while walking on what happened to be the ceiling, from Joe's point of view. Joe put his space gear in its proper place. He went to the small cubbyhole that Brown had appropriated for the office of the platform commander. Joe went in, naturally, without saluting. Brown sat in a fastened-down chair with thigh grips holding him in place. He was writing. On Joe's entry, he carefully put the pen down on a magnetized plate that would hold it until he wanted it again. Otherwise, it could have floated anywhere about the room. "Mr. Kenmore," said Brown awkwardly, "you did a very nice piece of work. It's too bad you aren't in the Navy." Joe said, "It did work out pretty fortunately. It's lucky the Chief and I were out practicing, but now we can take off when a rocket's reported any time." Brown cleared his throat. "I can thank you personally," he said unhappily, "and I do. But, really, this situation is intolerable. How can I report this affair? I can't suggest commendation, or a promotion, or anything. I don't even know how to refer to you. I'm going to ask you, Mr. Kenmore, to put through a request that your status be clarified. I would imagine that your status would mean a rank. About equivalent to a lieutenant junior grade in the Navy." Joe grinned. "I have, prepared a draft you might find helpful," said Brown earnestly. "It's necessary for something to be done. It's urgent. It's important." "Sorry," said Joe. "The important thing to me is getting ready to load up the platform with supplies from Earth. Excuse me." He went out of the office. He made his way to the quarters assigned himself and his crew. Mike greeted him with reproachful eyes. Joe waved his hand. "Don't say it, Mike. The answer is yes. See that the tanks are refilled and new rockets put in place. Then you and Haney go out and practice. But no farther than 10 miles from the platform. Understand?" "No," said Mike rebelliously. "It's a dirty trick." "Which," Joe assured him, "I commit only because there's a robot ship from Bootstrap coming up any time now, and we'll need to pick it up and tow it here." Joe went to the control room to see if he could get a vision connection to Earth. He got the beam, and he got Sally on the screen. A report of the attack on the platform had evidently already gone down to Earth. Sally's expression was somehow drawn and haunted, but she tried to talk lightly.
"Daring do and stuff, Joe?"
she asked.
"How does it feel to be a victorious warrior?"
"It feels rotten," he told her. "There must have been somebody in the rocket we blew up. He felt like a patriot, I guess, trying to murder us. But I feel like a butcher."
"Maybe you didn't do it,"
she said.
"Maybe the Chief's bombs."
"Maybe," said Joe. He hesitated. "Hold up your hand." She held it up. His ring was still on it. She nodded.
Still there. When will you be back?
He shook his head. He didn't know. It was curious that one wanted so badly to talk to a girl after doing something that was blood-stirring, and left one rather sickish afterward. This business of space travel, and even space battle, was what he dreamed of, and he still wanted it. But it was very comforting to talk to Sally, who hadn't had to go through any of it. "Write me a letter, will you?" he asked. "We can't tie up this beam very long."
I'll write you all the news that's allowed to go out,
she assured him.
Be seeing you, Joe.
Her image faded from the screen, and thinking it over, he couldn't see that either of them had said anything of any importance at all. But he was very glad they talked together. The first robot ship came up some 8 hours later, 2 revolutions after the television call. Mike was ready hours in advance, fidgeting. The robot ship started up while the platform was over the middle of the Pacific. It didn't try to make a spiral approach as all the other ships had done. It came straight up, and it started from the ground. No pushpots. Its takeoff rockets were monsters. They pushed upward at 10 gravities until it was out of atmosphere, and then they stepped up to 15. Much later, the robot turned on its side and fired orbital speed rockets to match velocity with the platform. There were 2 reasons for the vertical rise and the high acceleration. If a robot ship went straight up, it wouldn't pass over enemy territory until it was high enough to be protected by the platform. And it costs fuel to carry fuel to be burned. So if the rocket ship could get up speed for coasting to orbit in the first couple of 100 miles, it needn't haul its fuel so far. It was economical to burn one's fuel fast and get an acceleration that would kill a human crew, hence robots. The landing of the first robot ship at the platform was almost as matter-of-fact as if it had been done 1,000 times before. From the platform, its dramatic takeoff couldn't be seen, of course. It first appeared aloft as a pip on the radar screen. Then Mike prepared to go out and hook onto it and tow it in. He was in his spacesuit and in the landing lock, though his helmet faceplate was still open. A loudspeaker boomed suddenly in Brown's voice.
Evacuate airlock and prepare to take off.
Joe roared, "Hold that!" Brown's voice, very official, came,
Withhold execution of that order. You should not be in the airlock, Mr. Kenmore. You will please make way for operational procedure.
"We're checking the space wagon," snapped Joe. "That's operational procedure," the loudspeaker said severely.
The checking should have been done earlier.
There was silence. Joe and Mike, together, painstakingly checked over the very many items that had to be made sure. Every rocket had to have its firing circuit inspected, the tank's contents and pressure verified, the air connection to Mike's spacesuit, the air pressure, the device that made sure that air was going to Mike's spacesuit was neither as hot as metal in burning sunlight, nor cold as the chill of a shadow in space. Everything checked. Mike straddled his red-painted mount. Joe left the lock and said curtly, "Okay to pump the airlock. Okay to open airlock doors when ready. Go ahead." Mike went out, and Joe watched from a port in the platform's hull. The drone from Earth was 5 miles behind the platform in its orbit, and 20 miles below, and all of 10 miles off course. Joe saw Mike scoot the red space wagon to it, stop short with a sort of cocky self-assurance, hook onto the tow ring in the floating space barge's nose, and blast off back toward the platform with it in tow. Mike had to turn about and blast again to check his motion when he arrived. And then he and Haney in the other space wagon, nudged at it and tugged at it and got it in the great space lock. They went in after it, and the lock doors closed. Neither Mike nor Haney were out of their spacesuits when Kent brought Joe a note. A note was an absurdity in the platform, But this was a formal communication from Brown.